Hey everyone, it's Drayton from Scale Trains, and I'm here to talk to you about our latest run of Rivet Counter HO Scale EMD GP30s. Stay tuned. So this run has a variety of all new road names available for the first time with the GP30 lineup, and we're going to talk about each road name individually a little bit as we go across the table. We're going to start with the Conrail. The Conrail locomotives in this run are former Pennsylvania Railroad units, and the easiest way to tell for non-Conrail guys out there is actually the little plates up along the top of the locomotive. And what those plates are is the stanchions for where the train phone antennas were actually set up on the roof of the locomotives. And they were removed in the Penn Central era. They had a lot of issues with the train phone working on the Northeast Corridor. So during the Penn Central days, the train phone antennas came down and they were just plated over. And I never knew this until I started working here at Scale Trains. And I went back to some of my footage of the Indiana Northeastern Railroad. They actually have a couple of GP30s, and one of them is a former Conrail unit. And it actually does have these plates on the top that are still there after all these years. So, you know, Conrail inherited a lot of GP30s from their predecessor roads. But like I said, we're focusing on Conrail in this run. You've got the horn on the engineer's side of the cab. Leslie air horn, of course, sounds fantastic coming down the main line. You've also got your box for the cab signals out there in the front. But overall, just a gorgeous looking locomotive. You can't go wrong with that big blue paint scheme. So moving along, we're going to talk about Southern Railway. So Southern Railway had more GP30s than any other Class 1 railroad. They had 120. There were actually a couple of wreck victims. One of the wreck victims was actually rebuilt, but at the time EMD actually stopped producing the GP30. So they used the GP35 car body instead. That's the only GP30 that was like that. But all the other GP30s were standard design. One of the things that was unique about Southern Railway was the dynamic brake hatches. They actually had this kind of convex shape to them, whereas the other road names in this run are just kind of your standard dynamic brake hatch. But Southern Railways are kind of curved. One of the cool things too about Southern Railway is they had walkway lights that were hanging from the top of the locomotive. Our models, there's just simply not enough functions in the decoder, and plus the expense would be tremendous to be able to put walkway lights hanging from the top. So they're not operational on the model, but we do have operating walkway lights along the bottom. So Southern had overhead walkway lights and also along the walkway itself, and those are lit. The Southern Railway models are painted in the Deluxe scheme. This was a paint scheme that was first applied to the SD40-2s in 1978, and gradually over time, more and more of the locomotives were repainted as they'd go in for servicing. And one of the versions we're offering in this run is the 2601. This model is a replica of the prototype at the North Carolina Transportation Museum in Spencer, North Carolina. There's a few paint scheme variations between the 2601 and the standard deluxe versions, namely that under the road number on the cab, you'll see the Southern Railway reporting mark, SOU. Believe it or not, that was actually a Norfolk Southern thing. NS, when the merger happened, was dividing the assets of the Southern and the NNW, and so the reporting mark SOU is added under the cab. One of the really cool details, and it's really hard to see because it's so small, but on the engineer's side toward the back on the long hood end, you can actually see on the 2601 that it was painted in 1996 here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So I think that's really cool that we were able to put that on the museum version of the model. So if you've been to the North Carolina Transportation Museum, you've seen the 2601 undoubtedly. So really neat that it's here. And yeah, just overall, just a beautiful model. The 2585 was actually the last Southern Railway unit ever painted in November of 1983. From that point on, it was actually in the paint booth next to the first thoroughbred painted unit. So that's kind of cool. That's one of the reasons why we chose that road number. Moving along to another iconic railroad, the Atchison Topeka and the Santa Fe. This first run of Santa Fe GP30s are the as-delivered appearance. So Santa Fe had a modest size roster of GP30s. I believe they had 77, and they were delivered in the pinstripe scheme. These GP30s had kick plates. So, if you were switching in the yard, you could ride on the front of the locomotive. The FRA ended up outlawing the kick plates later on. I believe it was in 1978 is when they were banned outright. So that's one of the important things to know if you're a 60s and 70s modeler. You got to know whether or not your GP30 fits your era, and the easiest way to tell is if it has kick plates or not. So anything after 1978 will not have kick plates. So the Santa Fe pinstripe, they have kick plates, CB&Q, Cotton Belt, and the B&O. And one of the B&O units, actually some of the B&O units do not have kick plates. So make sure you pay special attention to the bullet points on our website to make sure that you're selecting the road number for your era. But going back to the Santa Fe, you had your air horn there on the engineer side again, very loud. It's one of the reasons why the air horns in later years were relocated toward the long hood. CB&Q was kind of an early pioneer of doing that. They actually put their air horn toward the back, toward the radiator. And I tell you what, these CB&Q locomotives just look absolutely fantastic. CB&Q had a modest roster of GP30s, and they didn't actually run around in Chinese red all that long. They were delivered in 1963, and they all ended up on the Burlington Northern roster 7 years later. Some of them ran around patched. So, if you're a BN modeler, an early BN modeler, you could actually pick up some CB&Q units and simply patch them over. I believe it was the mid-70s when most of them were repainted. Like I said, there weren't a lot of them. I want to say there were 38 total. So there weren't a whole lot, and then Great Northern had an even smaller roster. For some reason, I always thought that Great Northern had more GP30s than what they did, but CB&Q actually had more. So we'll offer Great Northern in the future. Like I said, all of them ended up with Burlington Northern. So moving along to another railroad that had even fewer GP30s is the Cotton Belt. Cotton Belt had 10, and we're offering several different road numbers. One thing that's important to note, this is the as-delivered version. So one of the key distinct features of the as-delivered Cotton Belts are the very strange looking to many yellow handrails. We've had a lot of people ask us, what's up with those handrails? Like, why are they yellow? But believe it or not, we have photography in our archive showing them as delivered with yellow handrails. They only looked like this for a few years. They were eventually renumbered. I want to say they were renumbered in the late 70s. I'm not a Cotton Belt expert though, so you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But eventually they were renumbered from the 700 series into the 5000 series. Actually, one Cotton Belt GP30 was preserved, and we were able to take measurements of that locomotive, to be able to offer the model in great detail. You got your air horn up front, your firecracker antenna, your bell is mounted on the conductor side. Of course, you got your full SP light package on the front and rear of the locomotive. And let me tell you, this is, as far as I know, the first GP30, whether Southern Pacific or Cotton Belt, that actually has the correct lighting detail. Same with CB&Q. CB&Q, I can't remember if it was a Mars or Gyrolite. The website will have the description. But until the Rivet Counter series, you were not able to get a GP30 on the market that had the correct lighting package. So for these two road names in particular, they have been long awaited by modelers all over the United States, and we're really happy to be able to offer them. The Southern Pacific and cotton belt versions. The light package is incredible. You've got your UDE light, so the red light, the emergency light, that is a direct mounted LED. So it's bright. Of course, you got your lit number boards as well, your walkway lights. So if you're a Southern Pacific cotton belt guy, you've got to get this locomotive in your collection. It's an absolute must-have. And of course, we've got Baltimore and Ohio. And the B&O GP30s, it's kind of interesting because they were delivered, in the early 60s, but many of these things ran around until the early 90s, still wearing the B&O scheme. They were, of course, patched for CSX, but I always thought that was kind of cool because it was one of those road names that, that iconic B&O scheme lasted for many, many years. One of the neat things that the B&O, their GP30s were rather Spartan in appearance. They didn't have a lot of unique details, but one thing they did have was the horn placed on the engineer's side of the cab. The 6953, this one has the kick plate, so this is a pre-78 model, has a horn that's painted the same color as the car body. And then the 6911, which is a we'll say post-75 because the kick plates started to disappear around that time. They were completely outlawed by 78. But 75 plus, we'll say that, has a silver painted air horn. And B&O, they just kept going. Some of them were repainted for chassis system, but like I said, a lot of them stuck around in that Capitol Dome paint scheme, and of course, no kick plate here on the front. So for you B&O guys, one thing I will say is B&O did have a pretty sizable fleet of GP30. So if you're a early CSX modeler, chassis system modeler, or just a straight up B&O guy, you're going to want to add these to your roster. It'll make for a great time to model project. So consider picking one of those up today. Well, guys, that's it. This is the second run of the GP30. Make sure you visit our website. Most road names are actually all sold out at this point, but by the time this video comes out, some road names will have become available once pre-order reservations expire. So make sure you check our website. If we don't have your specific road number or road name in stock, say here within the next 2 weeks, check back around the 1st of June, and we're probably going to have some available. So make sure you click that link in the video description. Smash that like button. We really appreciate that. It helps out a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And of course, if you're not subscribed to the Scale Trains YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe so that the next time we do a video like this, you'll be the first to know about it. So with that, guys, thanks for tuning in. I'm Drayton from Scale Trains. We'll see you next time.